The morning sky over the Mediterranean was deceptively calm as two American F-22 pilots, Captain Jake Reynolds and Lieutenant Mark Hayes, received the scramble order from NATO command. Their Raptors tore through the clouds toward a civilian Boeing 757 en route from Rome to New York, its passengers oblivious to the growing threat. Then, cutting through the static on a secure military frequency, came a voice soft, composed, yet laced with urgency. It was a woman, her words encoded in precise military jargon. "This is Eagle Shadow. SOS. Hostile jamming confirmed. Protect the asset at all costs. I'm the one you're sworn to defend with your lives." Reynolds gripped his controls tighter. Who was this silent passenger? Why would the pinnacle of American air power, the stealthy F-22, be deployed to safeguard one voice amid hundreds? It stirred echoes of Cold War vigilance in their minds, the unyielding duty to shield innocents from unseen dangers. But beneath it all lurked a deeper injustice, a young woman dismissed as ordinary, holding secrets that could turn the tide. As her call faded, the pilots locked eyes over comms. Little did they know, uncovering her identity would shatter every assumption from overlooked victim to unbreakable hero toppling prejudices in a single heart-pounding revelation. As the Boeing 777 leveled off at cruising altitude, the hum of the engines blended with the murmur of conversations among the passengers. In seat 15C, Emily Harper sat quietly, her blonde hair pulled back into a neat ponytail that framed her sharp, determined features. Her blue eyes, steady and perceptive, scanned the pages of a well-worn book titled EW Countermeasures in Aviation. At 28, she was a striking figure. Her toned body, shaped by years of rigorous Navy training, carried a quiet strength, her full bust and athletic build, a subtle emblem of feminine resilience. On her right shoulder, hidden beneath her simple blouse, was an American eagle tattoo. Its wings spread wide in eternal flight, a cherished legacy from her grandfather, a Wabuodu veteran who had fought in the skies over Europe. Emily wasn't just any traveler. She was a U.S. Navy electronic warfare expert, returning from a NATO conference in Rome to her base in New York. But to the world around her, she was invisible, blending in like any young woman on a routine flight. The book in her hands wasn't light reading. It delved into real-world defenses against electronic threats, like CRPA antennas that shielded aircraft from spoofing attacks, jamming signals designed to confuse navigation systems. Emily absorbed the details with ease, her mind effortlessly applying them to the aircraft's subtle vibrations. She kept her posture modest, her expressions neutral, avoiding eye contact that might invite questions. Around her, business people tapped away on laptops, elderly tourists shared stories of their Italian adventures, and families settled in for the long haul across the Atlantic. No one gave her a second glance. She was just a beautiful young girl, perhaps a student, wrapping up a European backpacking trip or an intern heading home. They couldn't fathom her rare expertise, the ability to dismantle sophisticated jamming networks or orchestrate seamless coordination between civilian airliners and NATO military forces. In their eyes, she was unremarkable safe to overlook a far cry from the warrior she truly was. Yet beneath that calm exterior lay a deep wound that had shaped Emily's life. Growing up in a proud American military family in Virginia, she had idolized her father, a Gulf War pilot, whose life was cut short in a tragic misidentification incident, much like the heartbreaking downing of Korean Air Flight 07 by Soviet forces in 1983, a story her grandfather often recounted with a heavy heart. Friendly fire from bad intel, he'd say, his voice cracking with the weight of old memories. Her grandfather had been her first mentor, teaching her the basics of electronic warfare from his own experiences in the Pacific Theater, where he jammed enemy radars to protect Allied bombers. But even he, in his well-meaning way, had harbored doubts about a woman's place in the thick of it. At the Naval Academy, those prejudices hit harder. Classmates and instructors dismissed her as the princess, denying her advanced training slots because she was too young, too female for the high-stakes world of EW ops. The isolation stung. She felt the loneliness of being perpetually underestimated, her achievements chalked up to pity or quotas rather than merit. This pattern followed her to the Rome conference, where seasoned NATO officers had eyed her skeptically during her presentation on integrated defense protocols. "Impressive slides, Miss Harper," one colonel had said with a patronizing smile. "But have you ever faced real pressure in the field?" The doubt echoed the voices from her past, leaving her to wrestle with an inner turmoil that made every success feel like a battle won in silence. Now, on this flight, the prejudices surfaced again. The businessman beside her, Mr. Smith, a grizzled 60-year-old veteran with a silver star pin on his lapel, struck up a conversation as the drink cart rolled by. Heading home after some sightseeing young lady, he asked, his tone avuncular but laced with assumption. When she mentioned the conference vaguely, he chuckled. "Aviation, probably in reservations or something administrative. These days they push young women like you ahead with all those diversity quotas. Back in my day, you earned your stripes through grit." Emily offered a polite smile, her heart tightening with quiet outrage. She said nothing, but inside the words burned, reminding her of the fairness her grandfather had fought for, the equality that still felt so elusive. How could she explain her world to someone who saw only the surface? As she turned back to her book, Emily's fingers brushed the edge of her sleeve where the eagle tattoo lay hidden. It was more than ink. It was a talisman, a reminder of her grandfather's words during her darkest academy days. "Strength isn't in shouting, Emily. It's in silent action, like the eagle soaring above the storm." Those words had carried her through, fueling her resilience amid the doubts. But now, as an encrypted message buzzed on her secure device, "EW threat alert from Eastern Europe, monitor closely," a flicker of unease stirred. It hinted at the national secret she carried, classified anti-jamming data that could shift the balance in modern airspace conflicts. She glanced out the window at the vast ocean below, evoking memories of Cold War tales. Her grandfather shared stories of American resolve, of protecting the vulnerable against invisible foes. In that moment, surrounded by strangers who saw her as less, Emily felt the weight of her hidden strength, a quiet force ready to rise if called upon. The encrypted message on Emily's secure device lingered in her mind, like a distant thunderclap, its warning about an EW threat from Eastern Europe, pulling her from the quiet cocoon of her seat. She glanced around the cabin, where passengers sipped their drinks and chatted idly, unaware that the world outside was shifting. It started subtly, a faint announcement from the captain over the intercom, his voice steady but edged with something unspoken. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to air traffic requirements, we'll be adjusting our route slightly. Nothing to worry about. We'll keep you updated." The words were meant to soothe, but Emily's trained ear caught the undertone. Air traffic requirements. In her line of work, that was code for something far more serious. She discreetly activated her personal EW scanner, a compact, classified military tool disguised as an innocuous tablet accessory. It wasn't some civilian app. This was Navy-issue gear designed for detecting electronic warfare signatures in real time. As the device hummed to life, the readings confirmed her suspicions. A sophisticated jamming signal was blanketing the area, disrupting standard navigation and communication channels. The source appeared to be a suspicious aircraft lurking on the edge of radar detection, its tactics eerily reminiscent of Russian maneuvers in the Ukraine conflict. deliberate interference to sow confusion in contested airspace. Emily's pulse quickened. She knew from her briefings that spoofing incidents had surged dramatically in recent years, with reports showing increases of up to 500% in 2024 alone, escalating into 2025 as geopolitical tensions boiled over. These weren't random glitches. They were calculated acts that could turn a routine flight into a catastrophe. Eavesdropping on the air traffic control frequency through her scanner, Emily pieced together the chaos unfolding. The jamming was scrambling civil-military coordination, blinding controllers to precise aircraft positions, and potentially leading to deadly misidentifications, like the tragic downing of Iran Air Flight 655 in 1988, a civilian jet mistaken for a threat amid electronic fog. Her mind raced back to her father's fate in the Gulf War, lost to a similar error in identification, his plane vanishing in a haze of faulty signals. The memory hit her like a wave, stirring a deep determination to protect the innocents around her, the elderly couple sharing photos of their grandchildren, the young family dozing peacefully. Who am I to save them? She thought, her internal conflict raging. She was just one person bound by orders to stay covert while transporting the anti-jamming data. But the stakes were too high. If she didn't act, this flight could become another statistic in the growing ledger of electronic warfare victims. To understand the threat, one had to grasp the basics of jamming noise, jamming where overwhelming signals drowned out legitimate ones, often deployed via EW pods on hostile aircraft. These pods could emit barrages of interference, fooling GPS and radar systems into believing planes were miles off course. Countermeasures existed like CRPA antennas that resisted spoofing by cross-checking multiple signals or geolocation techniques to pinpoint the jammer's source. Emily had mastered these in her training, simulating scenarios where a single failure could doom hundreds. But explaining this to civilians, it was like describing a storm to those who'd never felt rain. As the aircraft banked slightly, passengers began to murmur, sensing the deviation. Mr. Smith shifted in his seat, grumbling about delays. "Probably just some bureaucratic mix-up," he said, glancing at Emily. "You all right there, miss? You look a bit tense for a tourist." Emily forced a nod, her silence a shield as the internal storm brewed. The jamming intensified her scanner, flashing warnings of escalating spoofing fake signals, mimicking real ones, a tactic that had spiked alarmingly, with aviation authorities noting hundreds of % increases in incidents tied to conflict zones. She recalled her grandfather's stories of Wamtiwa radar, jamming how he'd countered enemy tricks with ingenuity and grit. "Never wait for permission when lives are on the line," he'd say. But here, amid strangers who saw her as fragile, the decision weighed heavily. Touching her eagle tattoo for strength, she whispered to herself, "This is it, the call I've trained for." The passenger's growing unease mirrored her own turmoil. A child whimpered. An elderly woman clutched her rosary. Emily's heart ached for them, fueling her resolve. She couldn't stand by. Her father's memory demanded action. The mini-climax erupted as the suspicious aircraft drew nearer its shadow on the radar, closing in. Alarms blared faintly in the cockpit, filtering through to the cabin as hushed crew whispers. Emily's scanner confirmed the approach, aggressive unannounced. Then the scramble from a NATO base in England, F-22 Raptors, launched under air shielding protocols, their stealthy forms racing to intercept. The pilots from the Hook, Reynolds and Hayes, locked onto the civilian jet, their earlier SOS mystery now unfolding in real time. Emily knew this was the tipping point. The adventure had called, and silence was no longer an option. The scramble of the F-22s echoed in Emily's mind like a distant roar, their invisible presence a stark reminder that the threat was no longer abstract. But as the captain's voice faded and the cabin settled into uneasy whispers. Doubt crashed over her like a relentless wave. She clutched her EW scanner tighter, its screen flickering with escalating warnings, but her fingers hesitated over the controls. Exposing herself now meant risking everything the secret order to safeguard the anti-jamming data tucked securely in her carry-on, a breakthrough that could neutralize threats from adversaries like those probing Eastern European borders. If she intervened, her cover as an ordinary passenger would shatter, potentially compromising her mission and drawing scrutiny from superiors who prized discretion above all. Women shouldn't interfere in military matters. Mr. Smith's earlier words rang in her ears, his mocking tone now amplified by the growing panic around her. He leaned over, his veteran eyes narrowing. "You seem awfully focused on that gadget, miss. Best leave the flying to the pros. It's no place for a pretty face like yours to play hero." Emily's chest tightened, the prejudice cutting deeper than any jammer signal. She recalled the academy days, those grueling years at Annapolis, where her dreams of following her father's path were met with closed doors. Too young, too female. The instructors had said, denying her spots in advanced EW simulations, relegating her to support roles while her male peers advanced. "You'll break under pressure," one had sneered, echoing the doubts that had haunted her since her father's loss. The isolation had been crushing, leaving her to prove herself in shadows, earning top marks through sheer will, but always questioning her worth. Now aboard this flight, the same shadows, loomed passengers arguing in hushed tones, their fears manifesting as pointed barbs. An elderly woman across the aisle, her hands trembling on her knitting, nodded in agreement with Smith. "He's right, dear. Let the men handle it. They've got the experience. We women know our place supporting from the sidelines." The words stung like salt in an old wound, evoking the quiet battles her grandmother had fought during Niwaniwanda rationing at home while her husband soared in the skies. How many times had Emily sworn she'd break that cycle only to face it again? Nearly giving up, she stared out the window at the endless blue, whispering to herself, "They won't believe me anyway." The data she carried was vital algorithms refined from her father's unfinished work, capable of piercing through noise, jamming and locating threats with pinpoint accuracy. But revealing it here to strangers who saw her as fragile felt like stepping into a minefield. Her grandfather's voice flickered in her memory. Eagles don't rush into storms without purpose. Was this her purpose, or just another futile fight against unbreakable walls? The cabin grew tenser, a child crying softly, an older gentleman clutching his wife's hand. Innocent lives hanging in the balance, much like the civilians her father had sworn to protect. The urge to act burned within her, but fear held her back, a paralyzing grip born of years being dismissed. Then the small twist arrived, a vibration from her device, a priority message from U.S. Command. Maintain silence unless absolute emergency. Digital integrity paramount. The words intensified the tension, a direct order clashing with the chaos unfolding. Emily's heart raced. The jamming was worsening, spoofing signals creeping into the aircraft's systems. Passengers' arguments escalated, gender prejudices laid bare in their frustration, men asserting control, women deferring out of habit. It outraged her soul, stirring compassion for those like her grandmother, who had endured silently. But in that moment of near surrender, the eagle on her shoulder seemed to pulse with life, a silent call to rise above. The adventure demanded her yet. Doubt whispered retreat. Could one overlooked woman truly make a difference? In the midst of her swirling doubts, Emily's fingers instinctively traced the outline of her eagle tattoo through her blouse, the familiar ridges grounding her like an anchor in turbulent seas. The message from command, "Stay silent unless emergency," burned in her mind, a stark reminder of the chains of protocol that had so often held her back. But as the cabin's tension thickened with passengers exchanging worried glances and Mr. Smith's gruff mutterings fueling the unease, a flood of memories washed over her. She closed her eyes, and there he was, her grandfather weathered and wise, sitting in his old armchair by the fire in their Virginia home, his Warthood medals glinting in the lamplight. "Eagles fly high despite headwinds, Emily," he'd say, his voice gravelly from years of command. As a child, she'd perch on his knee, listening rapt as he recounted jamming enemy radars over the Pacific, teaching her the rudiments of electronic warfare with sketches on yellowed paper. "It's not about brute force," he'd explain, "but outsmarting the storm, disrupting their signals before they disrupt yours." Those lessons had ignited her passion, but they also carried the weight of his era's limitations. He'd encouraged her Navy dreams, yet gently warned of the prejudices she'd face. "Prove them wrong, kiddo, but remember, true strength soars quietly." Now, in this moment of crisis, his words felt like a lifeline, urging her to rise above the gales of doubt and dismissal. As if summoned by her resolve, a gentle hand touched her shoulder. Emily opened her eyes to see the flight attendant, Mrs. Linda, a warm-faced woman in her mid-60s, her uniform crisp, but her eyes kind, etched with the lines of a life well lived. "You all right, dear? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said softly, her Midwestern accent soothing amid the rising murmurs. Emily managed a weak smile, but as she adjusted her sleeve, a glimpse of the eagle tattoo caught Mrs. Linda's eye. The older woman's expression shifted from concern to recognition. "That's no ordinary ink," she whispered, leaning closer. "My husband had something similar, flew P-51s in Korea. You're military, aren't you?" Emily hesitated, but the compassion in Mrs. Linda's gaze cracked her defenses. Nodding subtly, she revealed just enough the tattoo's story, her Navy role, the looming threat she alone could sense. Mrs. Linda's eyes widened, then softened with understanding. A former U.S. military nurse during the Vietnam War, she had seen her share of overlooked heroes, women like herself, tending wounds in the jungles, while the world questioned their place. "I served with gals who patched up pilots, under fire saved lives without a whisper of thanks." She shared her voice trembling with quiet pride. "We were called angels, but we were warriors too. If you're sensing trouble, honey, don't let these fools clip your wings. Let me help you get to the captain. I've got pull up there." Touched by Mrs. Linda's story, Emily felt a spark ignite within her, the same fire her grandfather had kindled. As they spoke in hushed tones, Mrs. Linda honored the unsung female military personnel. She'd known women who braved prejudice to serve their country, their resilience a beacon in dark times. It stirred Emily's heart, evoking compassion for generations of quiet strength, much like the tales her grandfather told of wartime camaraderie. In that exchange, education flowed naturally. Her grandfather's lessons on F-22 capabilities resurfaced in her mind, the jet's stealth coating that rendered it invisible to radar, its supercruise engines allowing sustained supersonic flight without afterburners, a marvel of American ingenuity designed to outmaneuver any foe. "He'd say the Raptor doesn't just fly, it dominates the sky unseen," Emily murmured, drawing strength from the memory. With Mrs. Linda's unexpected alliance, the path forward clarified. No longer alone, Emily stood her grandfather's encouragement echoing, "Eagles, fly high indeed." The headwinds raged, but with a mentor's wisdom and an ally's trust, she was ready to face them. With Mrs. Linda's words echoing like a rallying cry from the past, Emily felt the headwinds of doubt begin to shift. The alliance forged in that brief, heartfelt exchange gave her the push she needed. No longer would she hover on the edge of action. "Thank you," she whispered to the older woman, her voice steady, now infused with the quiet resolve her grandfather had instilled. As the aircraft plunged deeper into the jammed airspace, Emily activated her EW scanner fully, its discreet hum blending with the plane's engines. She wasn't just monitoring anymore, she was intervening. Drawing on her expertise, she initiated a localized countermeasure calibrating the device to emit a targeted signal that pierced the noise, jamming like a knife through fog. It wasn't a full breach, but enough to create a narrow window for secure transmission. With deft fingers, she keyed in a NATO emergency code, sending a brief encrypted burst. "This is Eagle Shadow, aboard civilian flight from Rome to New York. Jamming active. Request immediate coordination. Anti-jamming protocols engaged." The threshold crossed in that instant, the point of no return, where hesitation gave way to commitment. The aircraft shuddered slightly as it entered the heart of the dangerous airspace. The jamming's effects, now palpable cabin lights, flickered. In-flight entertainment screens glitched, and the captain's updates grew sparse. Passengers stirred uneasily, their earlier murmurs escalating into open concern. "What's going on?" a voice called from the back, igniting a chain of anxious questions. Emily rose from her seat, Mrs. Linda nodding encouragement as she guided her toward the front. But the move didn't go unnoticed. Mr. Smith, his face reddening with suspicion, blocked her path momentarily. "What are you doing, young lady?" "Sit down, this isn't a game." His words, laced with the condescension she'd fought her whole life, only fueled her determination. "I'm trying to help," she replied calmly, her blue eyes meeting his with unyielding focus. The conflict rippled through the cabin, like a wave, passengers dividing in their reactions, some eyeing her with doubt, others with desperate hope. An elderly couple clutched each other, their fear mirroring the vulnerabilities Emily had sworn to protect, stirring her compassion deeper. As she reached the galley, the real challenge unveiled itself. The F-22s materialized on the horizon, their sleek forms cutting through the clouds like guardians from another era. Captain Reynolds and Lieutenant Hayes, locked onto the civilian jet, picked up her SOS on their secure channels. "Eagle Shadow, confirm identity." Reynolds transmitted his voice, crackling through her scanner. Emily responded swiftly, her military training kicking in. "Confirmed. Navy EW specialist. Jamming source approaching from southeast, suspected Russian EW drone. Implementing countermeasures." The pilots exchanged glances in their cockpits, the revelation dawning this silent passenger was no civilian. She was the key to unraveling the threat. Intrigue built as her secret gradually revealed itself through fragmented comms. The anti-jamming data she carried, derived from her father's legacy, was a game-changer against Russian tactics algorithms that could geolocate jammers and restore coordination in chaos. The passengers' panic peaked as the suspicious aircraft's presence became undeniable, a low rumble vibrating through the fuselage. Smith, now standing, pointed accusingly. "She's meddling, probably making it worse." But Emily pressed on her toned frame, steady amid the turmoil, directing Mrs. Linda to calm the cabin, while she relayed positions to the F-22s. Stealth approach confirmed. Hayes acknowledged the Raptor's supercruise, propelling them silently into escort formation. Emily's heart pounded the weight of her hidden strength, now exposed. She thought of her grandfather's eagle soaring into the storm, not despite the winds, but because of them. The real challenge had begun, lives depending on her quiet courage, as prejudices clashed with the unfolding truth. The F-22's arrival marked the true plunge into the storm, their silent guardianship a beacon amid the electronic haze. But as Emily relayed her initial SOS, the challenges mounted like gathering clouds, testing her resolve in waves. The jamming intensified suddenly, a stronger surge from the suspicious aircraft, likely a Russian EW drone, its signals now blanketing the spectrum with relentless noise. Emily's scanner lit up with alerts, the interference drowning out standard channels and threatening to sever all coordination. This was Test 1, the raw power of electronic warfare pushing her skills to the brink. Drawing on her training, she switched to a backup frequency, invoking NATO's AJP-6 protocols, the Allied Joint Doctrine for Communication and Information Systems, a framework she'd mastered for just such crises. It guided her in establishing a secure, resilient link, bypassing the jammed bands with a narrow encrypted beam. Raptors, this is Eagle Shadow. She transmitted, her voice calm despite the adrenaline. Switch to backup Freak Delta 7. Confirm lock. Reynolds acknowledged the F-22s adjusting seamlessly their stealth, allowing them to close in undetected. The connection held a fragile thread in the chaos, enabling real-time sharing of threat data. Allies emerged in this initial fray, with Mrs. Linda proving invaluable. The veteran nurse moved through the cabin like a steadying force, her gentle reassurances calming frayed nerves. "Everyone stay seated and breathe easy," she said, her Vietnam-honed poise shining through. "We've got capable hands at work here." Her support bought Emily precious time, keeping panic from escalating into hysteria. Yet enemies loomed on dual fronts, the external threat of the drone, its EW pods, compact devices, spewing interference, drawing ever closer, and the internal prejudices that festered like wounds. Mr. Smith, emboldened by the turbulence, accused her outright. "This girl's tinkering is causing the panic. Sit down before you make things worse." His words, sharp as shrapnel, echoed the dismissals she'd endured, but Emily pressed on her coordination with the Raptors holding firm. The backup frequency, rooted in AJP-6's emphasis on resilient CIS, allowed the pilots to vector toward the drone, their supercruise closing the gap without detection. For now, the test was passed, but the storm was just beginning. Her quiet strength, a bulwark against the onslaught. The group's conflict erupted in Segment 2 as passengers' arguments turned the cabin into a cauldron of doubt. Test 2 isolated Emily. The jamming's effects, now manifesting in flickering lights and stalled screens, fueling accusations that she was somehow to blame. Who does she think she is playing with gadgets during a crisis? A middle-aged businessman snarled, his fear twisting into anger. The elderly woman who'd earlier supported Smith chimed in. "Young ladies should know their limits. Let the experts handle it." The gender injustice hit like a gut punch, touching the raw nerve of generations of overlooked women, much like those Mrs. Linda had served with in Vietnam. Emily felt the isolation keenly, her position at the galley making her a target, the prejudices amplifying the external threat. But allies rose unexpectedly. A young passenger, Smith's own son, a college kid in his early 20s, named Alex, stepped forward. "Wait, she's not causing this. She's fixing it. I saw her device. It's military grade." His support, born from glimpsing her scanner's readings, cracked the facade of doubt, a small victory amid the turmoil. Enemies sharpened their edges over the radio. A NATO officer's voice crackled through, skeptical and curt. "Eagle Shadow, this is Control. A young female expert. Verify credentials. We can't afford amateurs in this airspace." The dismissal stung, echoing the Academy's rejections, but Emily responded with precision, citing her clearance codes. The drone pressed closer, its jamming evolving into deceptive pulses, but her allies bolstered her, Mrs. Linda quieting the crowd, Alex defending her actions. The outrage built not just in Emily, but in the narrative of unfairness that resonated with anyone who'd been undervalued. Yet she endured, her resilience a quiet fire, turning isolation into focus. Segment 3 brought technical challenges to the Test 3, demanding Emily break through the spoofing, a insidious layer where false signals mimicked real ones, tricking the aircraft's systems into veering off course. Based on real Infinidome technology, a compact anti-spoofing solution she'd studied, Emily guided the captain via intercom. "Switch to CRPA mode. It's our shield against these fakes," she explained, her voice steady. Infinidome's approach, filtering signals through advanced algorithms, allowed her to isolate the genuine GNSS feeds. Education flowed in the moment she detailed the F-22's intercept capabilities, their air-to-air mission honed for such threats. Stealthy approaches, AIM-120 missiles ready to engage at beyond visual range. Raptors spoofing active hold formation while I geolocate. She transmitted her scanner, pinpointing the drone's emitter. The mini-climax surged as the suspicious aircraft approached, perilously close, its shadow nearly visible through the windows. Passengers gasped, panic cresting, but Emily's knowledge saved them. She directed a evasive bank, avoiding the misidentification trap that had claimed her father. The F-22s, guided by her data, initiated intercept their supercruise, closing the distance without Afterburner's engines whispering death. The escape was narrow hearts pounding, but her expertise turned the tide, a testament to quiet power amid chaos. In Segment 4's deep inner struggle, Emily recalled losing her father, the pain resurfacing like a fresh scar. Alone in her thoughts amid the fray, she whispered his name, drawing resilience from his memory, the Gulf War hero felled by electronic deceit. "I won't let it happen again," she vowed, her Kien Kwong, inspiring a quiet strength that echoed her grandfather's eagle. This inner fortitude born from loss fueled her onward, transforming grief into unbreakable resolve. The narrow escape from the drone's clutches left an electric tension hanging in the air, but as Emily's guidance steadied the aircraft, the true depth of the crisis began to unfold. The captain, his voice tight over the intercom, announced their diversion to RAF Bryce Norton, the storied NATO base in the English countryside, where Allied forces had coordinated defenses since the Cold War. It was a haven for military operations, its runways lined with history echoes of F-22 bombers and modern jets alike. But reaching it meant navigating the jamming's peak, a ferocious escalation that turned the sky into a maelstrom of disrupted signals. Emily's scanner screamed with overload warnings, the interference now a symphony of chaos noise, jamming flooding every frequency, spoofing pulses, creating ghost echoes on radar. The cabin reacted viscerally. Lights dimmed erratically, oxygen masks rattled in their compartments, and the in-flight map froze mid-update. Passengers gripped armrests. A young mother hugging her child closed their fear, palpable in the recycled air. Emily felt the barriers closing in complete loss of contact with ground control, the F-22's comms fracturing into bursts of static, despite her frantic adjustments. "Raptors, do you copy?" She transmitted, her voice echoing hollowly in her own ears. Fatigue gnawed at her edges, her eyes burned from staring at the screen. Her shoulders ached from the constant tension, and the overwhelming prejudices amplified every ache. Whispers rippled through the seats. "That girl's got us in this mess," one man muttered, his words a dagger of doubt. Even allies like Alex glanced uncertainly, the group's earlier support wavering under pressure. Mrs. Linda, ever the steadfast nurse, moved to her side. "Hold on, dear, breathe through it," she urged, pressing a water bottle into Emily's hand. The gesture, small but profound, evoked the compassion of those who'd served in Vietnam, tending to the weary under fire. But Emily nearly collapsed under the weight, her mind flashing to the lives at stake. The elderly gentleman wheezing slightly, the family whose vacation had turned nightmare. The jamming's peak wasn't just technical. It was a psychological assault, mirroring the historical blunders where electronic fog led to tragedy. She recalled her training briefs on AJP-6, NATO's doctrine for robust communication systems, emphasizing redundancy in crisis backup nets, resilient links that she'd helped refine. Yet, here in practice, it tested her limits, the barriers of isolation and exhaustion threatening to break her. As the aircraft banked toward Bryce Norton, the English landscape blurring below, Emily whispered a prayer for strength, her grandfather's eagle, a silent sentinel against the storm. The inner crisis crested in Segment 2, a torrent of doubt that nearly drowned her spirit. As the jamming's vice tightened, Smith rose like a specter from the past, his public mockery booming through the cabin. "Enough of this charade," he thundered, pointing a finger at Emily. "This girl's wild ideas are putting us all at risk. Women like her think they can waltz into men's work quotas, be damned, but look where it's gotten us." The words landed like blows, drawing gasps and nods from some, the gender prejudices laid bare in the confined space. An older couple exchanged looks, the wife murmuring, "He's got a point. Experience matters." The isolation hit Emily hard. Her position exposed the cabin dividing into factions of doubt. It echoed the Academy's darkest days, denied sim runs labeled too delicate for the rigors of EW, her achievements dismissed as favors. "You'll never last in the field." An instructor had sneered, his voice overlapping with Smith's in her mind. Tears pricked her eyes, not from weakness, but from the raw injustice, the compassion she felt for women like her grandmother, who had supported the war effort from home with quiet fortitude. But in that abyss, Emily struggled with her grandfather's memories, a lifeline pulling her back. Flashbacks surged him in his den, maps spread out teaching her to counter radar jams. "See here, kiddo," he'd say, his gnarled finger tracing lines. "The enemy throws wind, but eagles use it to climb." His stories of Pacific battles, where he'd saved squadrons by outwitting Japanese signals, infused her with grit. Touching her eagle tattoo, she felt its wings stir, drawing strength from the ink, a symbol of American perseverance, of rising above gales that had tested generations. Mrs. Linda stood by her whispering, "You've got his fire, don't let them snuff it." The support rekindled her, transforming the crisis into a forge, her resolve hardening like steel. The prejudices raged, but so did her inner eagle ready to soar. Segment 3 ratcheted the climax with a distracting twist that upended everything. As Bryce Norton's lights flickered on the horizon, Emily's scanner clawed through a sliver of clear signal, unveiling the shocking truth. The suspicious aircraft wasn't a Russian drone, but an insider, a betraying ally, a rogue NATO operative twisting the jamming for shadowy ends, perhaps espionage or personal vendetta. The surprise was profound, intriguing in its betrayal, redirecting suspicion from external foes to the rot within. "It's one of us." Emily breathed, her voice trembling, as patterns aligned familiar codes, insider access, that explained the precision. This misdirection evoked the somber history of misidentification, like Iran Air Flight 6MVI-5 in 1988, where U.S. forces amid Persian Gulf tensions mistook a civilian Airbus for an F-14 due to electronic errors and haste. Her grandfather had recounted it with grief. Over 290 souls lost, women, children, because trust failed and signals lied. The education hit home. Such tragedies underscored flawed protocols, the human toll of technical hubris lessons, baked into modern doctrines like AJP-6 to prevent repeats. Now, with the insider's craft bearing down, Emily's anti-jamming data became the ultimate weapon, her approach to the inmost cave, a crucible of revelation. The F-22s still linked faintly reported anomalies. Eagle Shadow signatures don't match, Russian EW confirm. The tension built, passengers sensing the shift, their fear a palpable force. Smith's mockery faded into stunned silence as fragments of truth emerged over the intercom. Emily's heart raced compassion, surging for the innocents aboard families like hers torn by betrayal. The tattoo pulsed with urgency, a call to confront the deepest deceit, propelling her into the heart of the storm. The revelation of the insider's betrayal hurled the aircraft into the heart of the ordeal, the rogue craft now unleashing a full-spectrum jamming attack that engulfed everything in a digital abyss. In this main climax, the suspicious aircraft, piloted by the turncoat operative, ramped up its assault EW systems, flooding the airspace with overwhelming interference. Alarms wailed in the cockpit, the Boeing's instruments spinning wildly as false signals infiltrated, threatening to send them spiraling off course. Emily, her face set in grim determination, coordinated from the flight deck, her scanner the only lifeline amid the chaos. "Captain, hold steady. I'm breaking through," she said, her voice cutting through the panic like a steady anchor. The F-22s initiated intercepts, their stealthy silhouettes, darting into position, but the jamming's ferocity tested even their advanced suites. Reynolds's transmission broke through in fragments. "Eagle Shadow, losing lock. Need your fix. Need your..." Drawing on her profound EW knowledge, Emily orchestrated the response, recalibrating on the fly to counter the barrage. She deployed virtual shields using adaptive algorithms to filter the noise, her fingers flying over the device as if conducting a symphony of survival. The life and death peril escalated as the rogue craft maneuvered for a deadly convergence, forcing the Boeing into a near-collision path. The airframe groaned under the strain, passengers screaming as the world tilted, the horizon blurring into terror. A child wailed, an elderly man clutched his chest, innocent lives flashing before Emily's eyes, stirring a deep compassion that fueled her. In that razor-edge moment, she revealed her full identity to the crew. "I'm Lieutenant Emily Harper, U.S. Navy EW Specialist. This data I'm carrying, it's our way out." The captain's sweat beading on his brow nodded, yielding control of the auxiliary comms. Raptor's vector to these coords. Emitter isolated. She broadcast, her calm belying the storm within. The near miss scraped by mere seconds the aircraft, shuddering as it evaded, hearts pounding in collective relief. But the ordeal pressed on Emily's mettle, the thin line between salvation and catastrophe, her quiet strength a beacon in the electronic night. Proving her mettle in Segment 2, Emily guided the F-22s with unwavering precision, her commands a lifeline in the void. "Activate EW pods, phase the arrays to disrupt their core," she instructed, her expertise shining through. These pods, sleek modules on the Raptor's underbellies, countered the jamming with directed energy, emitting pulses that neutralized the rogue's signals while safeguarding their own. The pilots executed masterfully their air-to-air prowess on full-display stealth coatings, absorbing radar supercruise, propelling them at Mach speeds without flares. As the countermeasures took hold, the jamming cracked comms flickering back to life. Emily saved the flight in that pivotal surge, her father's algorithms woven into the data she guarded, geolocating the emitter with surgical accuracy, allowing the Raptors to lock on. "Fire when ready," she said. Her voice firm, the threat neutralized in a distant burst. Outrage swelled among the passengers as the truth dawned, their prejudices crumbling like faulty defenses. Word spread from the cockpit. Smith's face drained of color, his earlier mockery now a bitter echo. She's the one keeping us alive." He stammered, the cabin's accusations turning to stunned apologies. The elderly woman, tears in her eyes, reached out. "Forgive us, dear, we were blind." The shift was profound, touching the raw injustice that had simmered passengers, confronting their biases in the face of her heroism. Alex Smith's son nodded proudly. That experience isn't everything, it's about who steps up. Emily's medal proved not merely technical, but transformative, inspiring a wave of humility and gratitude, the flight's salvation, a mirror to overlooked valor in everyday battles. The major twist detonated in Segment 3, unraveling Emily's deepest secret amid the fray. As the F-22s closed the noose, her scanner decoded the rogue's final transmissions, a signature tied to her father's legacy. The EW data wasn't anonymous. It was his unfinished masterpiece algorithms he'd crafted before his Gulf War demise, meant to avert the misidentifications that stole him away. But the surprise pierced deeper, the insider. The betraying ally was her old academy friend, Lieutenant Sarah Klein, a woman she'd mentored now, twisting the data for betrayal, distracting with Russian mimicry, to mask her theft, perhaps for black market gains. "Sarah, you were like a sister," Emily whispered, the shock, visceral betrayal cutting through her like shrapnel. The distraction fabricating Russian EW tactics had fooled everyone, until Emily's insight unmasked it. Passengers gasped as snippets reached them, Smith's outrage turning inward. "One of our own." The twist heightened the emotional stakes, evoking compassion for Emily's layered loss, the data a piece of her father, now weaponized by a trusted confidant. In that heartbreak, her resilience flared, turning personal anguish into unyielding focus. The climax resolution in Segment 4 delivered satisfying victory. Emily shattering the jamming with a triumphant integration of her father's algorithms. Now overload their core, she commanded the F-22s, unleashing precision strikes that obliterated the threat in a silent explosion. Signals cleared like lifting fog comms, restoring in a rush of clarity. Cheers erupted, prejudices dissolved in collective relief. Smith approaching humbly, "Lieutenant, I was a fool. Your strength saved us all." The satisfaction was profound. Lives preserved through her quiet mettle, the ordeal's end, a harmonious blend of legacy and courage, leaving hearts full and horizons clear. The jamming shattered like glass under pressure, the rogue craft's demise a distant silent affirmation in the clearing skies. As the F-22s peeled away, their mission accomplished, the Boeing steadied its descent toward RAF Bryce Norton, the runway lights winking like welcoming stars. Emily leaned back in the cockpit jump seat, her body drained, but her spirit alight with the quiet triumph of survival. The captain's voice, now clear and grateful, announced over the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been cleared for landing. Thanks to some extraordinary help aboard. We're safe." Cheers erupted from the cabin, a wave of relief washing over the passengers. Hugs shared, tears wiped away the elderly couple raising their clasped hands in silent prayer. The aircraft touched down smoothly, tires kissing the tarmac with a gentle sigh, emergency vehicles flanking the runway, but standing down as the threat evaporated. Ground crews swarmed, but for Emily, the real reward began. In the hush of that moment, the knowledge that her father's data woven into her decisive actions had not only saved this flight, but rippled outward, restoring comms for multiple diverted aircraft across Europe. NATO command patched through immediately, their voices crackling with admiration. "Lieutenant Harper, your intervention was textbook beyond it, really. That anti-jamming protocol you deployed, it's already being disseminated. You've saved countless lives today." The recognition was profound, a validation that pierced the veil of years of doubt, honoring not just her skills, but the legacy she'd carried so faithfully. As the doors opened and fresh air rushed in, the change among the passengers was palpable, a collective awakening from the fog of prejudice. Mr. Smith, his face etched with humility, approached Emily in the aisle, his silver star pin catching the light. The gruff veteran who had embodied the barrier she'd battled extended a trembling hand. "Lieutenant." "Emily," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was wrong, dead wrong. I let my old ways blind me. Experience isn't everything. It's heart and smarts like yours that win the day. Forgive a foolish old man." The apology hung in the air, sincere and raw, touching the core of fairness that her grandfather had fought for in Wawiduom. Emily clasped his hand, her blue eyes meeting his with compassion. "We're all learning, Mr. Smith. That's what makes us stronger." The moment resonated through the cabin, passengers nodding in agreement, the elderly woman who had doubted her now offering a tearful embrace, whispering, "You're a hero, dear, just like the women who kept the home fires burning." Smith's son Alex stood nearby, his admiration evident. "You showed us all," he said. The shift was more than personal. It was a microcosm of progress, prejudices yielding to truth, inspiring a quiet reflection on how assumptions could blind even the wisest. In that glow of victory, Emily found the inspiration to pass on her eagle legacy, ensuring the flame of resilience burned brighter for the next generation. As they deplaned, she pulled Alex aside, the young man, whose support had been a spark in the darkness. "Your dad means well," she said softly, rolling up her sleeve to reveal the eagle tattoo its wings eternally spread. "This was my grandfather's symbol from the war when he jammed enemy radars to bring his boys home. He taught me that strength soars on silent wings, using headwinds to climb higher." Alex's eyes widened, touched by the story, a bridge between eras. "Pass it on," Emily urged, her voice warm with the compassion of a mentor. "Doubt will come, but remember, eagles don't fear the storm, they own it." The young man nodded, inspired, as if receiving a torch from history itself. NATO officials awaited on the tarmac, their commendations formal, but heartfelt medals discussed her data, hailed as a breakthrough that would safeguard future skies. But for Emily, the true reward was this Ripple Smith's change of heart, Alex's newfound resolve, the passenger's gratitude echoing her father's unfulfilled dream. In saving them, she'd honored the past, proving that one overlooked soul could redefine victory. Her quiet courage a testament to the enduring American spirit of rising above. The triumph at Breeze Norton lingered like a warm afterglow as the passengers deplaned, their faces a tapestry of gratitude and awe. Emily stepped onto the tarmac, the cool English breeze carrying whispers of victory. But she knew the journey back to the U.S. would be no simple return. NATO's commendations rang in her ears, her data hailed as a shield that had safeguarded not just their flight, but a web of civilian routes across the Atlantic. Medics checked the weary travelers, and officials debriefed the crew. But for Emily, the real road back began with a sobering twist, the insider's betrayal unmasked as her old friend Sarah cast a long shadow. Sarah's motives, selling secrets to foreign brokers, tied directly to Emily's father's data, a personal wound reopened. As military transport whisked her stateside, the elation faded into uncertainty. Back in Virginia, at Naval Headquarters, the investigation loomed, overstepping authority. They called it her unauthorized coordination, scrutinized under the harsh light of protocol. The challenges emerged swiftly, prejudices from conservative superiors rearing like familiar ghosts. In a stark conference room overlooking the Potomac, Admiral Harlan, a grizzled veteran in his 70s, his walls lined with Cold War relics, led the inquiry. "Lieutenant Harper, your actions were reckless," he intoned, his voice gravelly with decades of command. "A young officer like you bypassing chains, it's insubordination quotas or not." The words echoed the Academy's dismissals, his skepticism laced with gender biases that dismissed her expertise as youthful impulse. Flanked by stern-faced investigators, Emily faced pointed questions. Why reveal classified data? Why coordinate without clearance? The insider twist complicated it. Sarah's betrayal implicated Emily's past mentorship. Whispers suggesting she should have spotted the signs. Women in EW too trusting. One aide muttered the prejudices compounding like storm clouds. Fatigue from the ordeal weighed on her. Her body still aching, but the emotional toll cut deeper doubt creeping in. Questioning if her quiet strength had invited this scrutiny. Passengers' faces flashed in her mind. The child safe. The elderly couple reunited, stirring compassion that fueled her defense. "I acted to save lives, sir," she replied steadily, her blue eyes unwavering. Protocol bends when humanity demands it. Amid the trials, humanistic anchors grounded her. A letter arrived from Mrs. Linda, postmarked from her Midwest home, its handwritten pages a balm for the soul. "Dear Emily Fu." It began, "You reminded me of the nurses I served with in Nam, quiet heroes, patching up the broken under fire, ignored by the brass, but vital to the fight. Your courage saved us all. Don't let them dim your light." Enclosed is a photo from my service days, women like us standing tall. The words touched Emily's heart, evoking compassion for unsung warriors, much like her grandmother's stories of wartime sacrifice. Family memories surged her grandfather's den, where he'd share tales of jamming Japanese fleets, his eagle insignia pinned to her as a child. "Roads back are rough, kiddo," he'd say, "but they lead home stronger." Touching her tattoo, she drew from that legacy resilience blooming amid the interrogation. Calls from Alex bolstered her Smith's son, inspired sharing how his father now spoke of her with respect. "You changed him, Lieutenant." The humanistic threads letter memories wove a tapestry of support, reminding her that victory wasn't just in the skies, but in the hearts transformed. As the inquiry dragged on, prejudices clashing with her truth, Emily held firm the road back, a forge, refining her spirit for the resurrection ahead. The road back's trials, with their probing questions and lingering doubts, culminated in a resurrection that redefined everything. In the sterile glow of the headquarters briefing room, the final twist unfolded, like a dawn breaking through storm clouds. Investigators poring over logs and signals exposed the insider, fully Sarah Klein. Emily's old academy confidant, her betrayal laid bare in intercepted comms and financial trails leading to foreign adversaries. "She sold out for greed." Admiral Harlan announced, his gruff tone softening with revelation. The evidence pieced from Emily's data proved her innocence unequivocally. Not only had she not overstepped recklessly, but her vigilance had unmasked the rot within. The reversal rippled across the system, prejudices crumbling as superiors confronted their biases. "We misjudged you, Lieutenant." Harlan admitted, his eyes meeting hers with newfound respect. "Your actions didn't break protocol, they saved it." The room fell silent, the weight of the moment profound, as clearances were reinstated and commendations flowed. Emily stood tall. Her quiet strength vindicated the eagle on her shoulder, seeming to spread its wings wider in triumph. In Segment 2's Inner Victory, Emily overcame the prejudices that had shadowed her career, emerging transformed. NATO's promotion came swiftly, a cable from Brussels, appointing her head of EW coordination, a role crafted from her proven mettle. "Your protocols will be standard across Allied forces." The dispatch read, honoring her father's legacy woven into the data. No longer the young female expert, dismissed in whispers, she was now the architect of resilience, her youth and gender assets in a changing world. Admiral Harlan, once skeptical, pinned a new commendation on her uniform. "Experience meets innovation here," he said, his voice carrying the humility of lessons learned. The victory was deeply personal. Standing before a mirror in her quarters, Emily traced her eagle tattoo its lines, a map of battles won. "You fly high now," she whispered, symbolizing the resilience that had carried her through headwinds, from academy rejections to in-flight betrayals. Her grandfather's words echoed eagles use storms to soar. Family memories flooded back his W-2 tales, her father's Gulf War sacrifice, infusing her with quiet pride. Allies like Mrs. Linda sent messages of joy, Alex, sharing how her story inspired his own path. The outrage built not just in Emily, but in the narrative of unfairness that resonated with anyone who'd been undervalued. Yet she endured her resilience, a quiet fire, turning isolation into focus. Segment 3 unveiled an unexpected twist of social impact, Emily's data preventing a larger conflict and saving countless civilians. As analysts deployed her algorithms, they uncovered a web of impending attacks, spoofing operations targeting transatlantic routes orchestrated by Sarah's buyers. The preemptive strikes averted disaster flights, rerouted seamlessly lives preserved in a ripple of compassion. Thousands owe you their safety. A NATO general confided the numbers, evoking the human toll avoided like families reunited, elders spared heartbreak. The twist touched deep wells of empathy. Reports detailed near misses over populated areas, civilians on the ground oblivious to the averted peril. Emily visited a memorial for misidentification victims, including Iran Air 6545, laying flowers with a heavy heart. No more, she vowed her actions a bridge between past tragedies and future safeguards. The social resonance spread. Media hailed her as a quiet hero, inspiring women and STEM veterans like Smith advocating for change. In quiet moments, she reflected on the compassion that drove her, the child's cry in the cabin, the elderly hands clasped in fear. Her resurrection wasn't just personal, it was a beacon for society, proving that one overlooked voice could heal divisions, foster equality, and protect the vulnerable with vigilant grace. 1 year later, the echoes of that fateful flight had woven themselves into the fabric of Emily's life, transforming her from a silent guardian into a guiding light. At U.S. Naval Headquarters in Virginia, under the same skies where her grandfather had once dreamed of flight, she stood before a room of eager young recruits, men and women from diverse backgrounds, their faces alight with the hunger to serve. As head of EW coordination, a position born from her crucible in the skies, Emily led training sessions that blended cutting-edge tech with timeless wisdom. Strength comes from silence. She conveyed her voice steady and warm, like a storyteller passing down family lore. It's about overcoming prejudices through action, listening to the winds of doubt, and using them to soar higher. The recruits nodded, absorbing the message, as she demonstrated her father's algorithms, now standard in NATO defenses, turning electronic chaos into clarity. One young woman reminiscent of Emily's academy self approached after class. "How do you push past the barriers?" she asked. Emily smiled, rolling up her sleeve to reveal the eagle tattoo. "By remembering you're not alone, generations before us paved the way." The elixir she brought back was a profound lesson in resilience, equality, and the beautiful fusion of experience and innovation. Resilience forged in the fires of loss and betrayal taught that headwinds weren't endings, but elevations, much like her grandfather's W-2 jams that saved squadrons, or her own stand against Sarah's deceit. Equality shone through in her story, proving that merit transcended age, gender, or assumptions. The prejudices that once clipped wings now fueled flights of progress. And combining experience with innovation. It was the heart of her message. The old guards, like Admiral Harlan, learning from her fresh perspectives, creating systems where veteran grit met modern ingenuity to protect the vulnerable. This elixir was deep enough for sharing a tonic for souls weary from life's battles, inspiring conversations around dinner tables, where elders recounted their own overlooked triumphs. Emily's journey reminded them that true victory lay not in loud accolades, but in quiet impacts, saving flights, mending divides, honoring legacies like her father's data, which continued to avert crises long after the storm. The lingering impact resonated in her grandfather's quote, etched into her very being. Eagles don't fear storms. They use the wind to fly higher. It became her mantra, shared in briefings and quiet moments alike, a reminder that adversity was the uplift for greatness. Letters poured in from Mrs. Linda, now a pen pal sharing Vietnam anecdotes, from Mr. Smith, who volunteered at veteran centers preaching inclusivity, from Alex, thriving in aviation school, his path ignited by her example. These threads wove a tapestry of change, touching hearts with compassion for the unsung, evoking memories of American resolve in wars past. Emily often visited her father's grave, the eagle tattoo, a bridge between generations, whispering thanks for the elixir that turned personal pain into communal healing. I once thought prejudices were barriers, insurmountable walls that hemmed us in. But through Emily's story, I realize they are motivators to prove value sparks that ignite the fire within. In today's world, with rapidly changing technology, reshaping our skies and lives, we need to honor those who dare to exceed limits, whether young or old, male or female. It's in these tales of quiet courage that we find our own wings. If this story touches you, please like, share with friends, and subscribe to the channel for more inspirational lessons from American military history. Let's build a stronger community together. Comment below what you think about silent strength.